Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. We've made it through another week, and we've also made it through another take, apparently. The audio is now fixed. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Wade and Stacy and Subhemi. If I mispronounced your name, I do apologize. And Bruce, Harshal and Anita and Asuka, Chris, Hala, Chris again, Mayur. Great to see everyone. Hope you're all excited for the weekend. I'm looking forward to just relaxing, sitting back, and having some fun with the family. Benjamin from Ghana, great to see you. Paul and Gal, Rohit. All right, which webcam do you use? I'm currently using the Sony a7S III to stream this video. It's a fantastic camera, and I've got a 1.4 lens on there, so the depth of field is just crispy and nice. Looks great. Hello from India and Sydney, Australia. Sorry, Bruce. I don't know how I messed up Bruce, but I somehow managed to mess up Bruce. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hop over to my screen, and we're going to get going with Masterclass number 61. We've been at this for 61 weeks. It's been a long time. So last week, I have no idea what we covered. But at some point during, I think it was last week or the week before, I went live on my personal YouTube channel, and I designed out this NFT card using 3D transforms and masks and all this fun stuff. And it was a lot of fun. And some of you wanted to know how to, design a web experience for NFTs or galleries or projects and things like that. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Are you streaming through OBS? I am streaming through Wirecast. All right, Umacorn saying Sony 7S. So it's the a7S III, which came out not too long ago. It's a great camera if you're looking for video. Especially for video. Photos, it's good for photos, but I think it's only 12 megapixels, so you won't be able to zoom in too much. All right, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be designing a web experience, and I did post a little sneak on Twitter in the thumbnail. You may have seen that as well. And right over here to the left, that's kind of what we're going to be designing. Something to just, put your designs in, landing page, web experience, whatever you might want to tackle. So let's go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD. And we're going to start from a nice blank canvas. And we do have a bunch of presets we can dive into: iPhone, web, Instagram, that sort of thing. We're going to start with a web experience this week, possibly also next week. And then we're on break for a week. And then when we come back, we might tackle the mobile view of this. Possibly. We'll see. All right. So I'm going to choose 1920 by 1080. We're going to start nice and large. I know some people like to start a little bit smaller than that. Completely up to you. Perfect. And if anyone has questions throughout this masterclass, we do dive a little bit deeper than usual. Throw them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer. All right. Now, there are a few ways we can go about this. We can go for a light version. We can go for a dark version. I like to start with the dark version only because I love dark mode. I know, save the comments. XD doesn't have dark mode yet. I'm aware of that. So I have the artboard selected, and I'm going to choose a nice blue, dark blue color, somewhere in this range here. Maybe at some point we can put a gradient back there. Very subtle gradient, we'll see. And I'm going to name this landing page. Perfect. Okay. Now, with any website that we might be designing, we need a logo. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with some branding. And I might want to start with, so I'm going to name this, if you caught that in the thumbnail, I'm going to name it NFT, right? Like that. Tea that you drink, and NFT, it's kind of a fun, sort of cheesy pun on the whole NFT space. So we're going to go for that. But I want to style it up a little bit. I want to have some fun with this logo. So it's going to be separated into a few parts. So I'm going to start with the word tea. And I'm thinking for the text on the word tea, you might want to go a little bit more stylistic. So something like Casey, possibly, right? And if we switch the weight over to either bold or ultra, bold looks pretty good. I think ultra is going to be a little bit too wide, but something like bold looks pretty nice, right? And then for the N and the F, we probably want to stay away from something very stylistic, especially when it comes to the N and the F. It might be a little bit difficult to read these single characters. Someone's asking, how do you deal with developers? You have to make something 1366 by 768. They mess up so I don't typically work with developers too often. So, I think the main thing is communicate with them. Find out what they want, let them know that what you can offer, find out what their restrictions are and what their recommendations are, and kind of go from there. But I don't typically work directly with developers anymore. So if anyone in the chat works with developers on a daily basis, that could be fun to hear their suggestions. So for something like this, these two characters, we might want to go a little bit more traditional. So something like Casablanca, this text here, this typeface here, which is from Adobe Fonts. And I think bold could do. So we have an N, and then possibly beside we might want our little F, right? Just like that. Now, maybe to give it a little bit of style, we might want to play around with the actual text a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look. Oh, this is not updating. Give me 1 second. Casablanca. Huh, this is not updating. I broke something. I don't know what I broke, but I broke something. But that's okay, because what we're going to be doing is we are going to be converting this into a path. So both of these I'm going to have selected. I'm going to Command and Control 8, or under the object menu, path, and then convert to path. That way we can really fine tune some of these points. Will you use the Windows 11 design systems in one of your masterclasses? That's an interesting idea. I might. It's definitely different, right? They've got a lot of glass and a lot of transparency and blurs. That could be an interesting masterclass. I know the first beta of Windows 11 just came out, so I'm going to give it a little bit so that it settles down, and then I'll take a look at the design system and see what we can do. All right, now here we can start defining some of our colors. Instead of the plain white, we might want to bring in maybe some purples and pinks, right? To really define what this is going to look like. Maybe something like that. And then might want to go a little bit more pink over here. Somewhere in this range. And we can always tweak these colors later on. Now, one thing I've mentioned in past classes is that if you're working on a dark background, like I'm working now, it's very difficult sometimes to work with very bright, vibrant colors like this. It clashes a little bit with that background, right? So I just like taking that color and just pulling it outwards a little bit, just so it removes a little bit of that saturation and then vibrancy. It just makes it a little bit more soothing on the eyes, right? I'm going to make sure that this lines up really nicely. And I might want to overlap this a little bit. Now, if you take a look at this, right, the overlap looks a little bit strange. So what we might want to do is we may want to somehow separate this from the other letters and the background. Now, since we are going with something like NFT, right, it would be kind of cool if we had sort of like a little tea bag from the top down here to where the F kind of intersects, right? So what I'm going to do is Manish is asking, what should be the icon size in the bottom nav bar for Android app design? So definitely go ahead and find the developer guidelines for Android, but typically it's the hotspot itself should be somewhere between 40 and 45 pixels. It's going to differ based on the device you're designing for, but you want that nice large area at the bottom so that they can tap on it. Now, the icons could be a little bit smaller, especially if you have multiple, if you have maybe 5 icons down there on the navigation bar. But the actual spot, the invisible spot that users will have to tap on should be in that 40 to 45 pixel range. So what I might want to do is I'm going to hop over to Nucleo. I do have some icons here from Font Awesome, and I'm going to type out something like T. And we've got these here. Either one should work. I'm going to copy this to my clipboard, paste it in there. And for this, all I want is this shape here, right? This one right here. Don't want the handle, but I just want this one. And of course, I could easily create the shape myself, but just so we kind of move along, I'm going to just grab this, shrink it down a little bit, and pop it somewhere in this area. Now I want to make it a little bit smaller so it's not overpowering. Something like this, right? And I might want to bring this down as well. So I can just double click to access that path, kind of move this down. Interesting, right? And this I may want to move up so we don't actually see that little bar on the left. All right, that could work. Again, I might tweak these colors at some point just so that there's a nice difference between the purple and the pink. But it looks pretty good. And I can also, if you know, depending on the style, I can change this shape to match the background color so it almost looks like there's a knockout. I don't know how I feel about that. I kind of like the white. And then for the actual T, I'm also going to go ahead and convert this into a path. And there we go. And we can get a little bit fancy with maybe some overlapping, possibly, right? And there we go. We now have our logo. So I'm going to go ahead and group this. I'm going to call this logo. And knowing that I'm going to be using this logo on multiple screens, possibly even multiple devices, I may want to turn this into a component. So either in my document assets over to the left, I can go ahead and press that plus button. Over to the right in the properties inspector, or Command or Control K, and I'll create a component just like that. All right. Now this logo is way too big right now, so I'm going to just shrink it on down. Take a quick look at the preview. It's looking okay, right? I think it's still a little bit too big probably, but for now we're going to leave it at that. Perfect. All right, now I did see somebody earlier talk about margins and guides and that sort of thing. If I was really working with developers and I wanted to make sure that this was pixel perfect, I would absolutely turn on my, guides and grids over here. I have my layout grid, right? And I can use a 12 column, 4 column, 8 column, all these different columns. Again, a lot of it depends on your developer. So talk with the developers, figure out what they're looking for, and kind of go from there. But I'm not necessarily looking to have this developed, so I'm not too concerned at the moment. We're going to eyeball some stuff. All right. So logo's looking pretty good. Now, over to the right, we may want some additional elements. We might want a search bar, and we might want some links, and then maybe over to the far right, a button to maybe connect our wallet. So we're going to start with our search experience. I'm going to grab my rectangle, shortcut key R, and drag one out. Now there are a lot of different ways we can style this search bar, right? We can round out the corners completely, like that. We can keep it nice and straight, or we can just round them out just a little bit. So let's go for about 8 pixels. And since we're going for more of a darker interface, we might want to kind of move that in that direction, right? But we don't want it too dark that we won't be able to see. So maybe we'll do something like this, like a nice dark blue. And then the border, what I like to do on darker elements is set the border color to a pure white and then drop the opacity quite a bit, somewhere between 5 and 10%, just so that it kind of blends in really nicely with the shape that it's on, right? So it's not a white border, but it's not also a gray border. It's more of like a lightish blue because I'm using that opacity to kind of bring in some of those colors. All right. And then possibly just to separate it from the background, this is totally optional. You may want a little bit of a drop shadow. Possibly, I talk about drop shadows a lot, but I'm going to go ahead and enable drop shadow. I'm going to pull it down a little bit. Let's try about 16. And I'm going to blur it quite a bit as well, so we have a nice subtle drop shadow. And then experiment with the opacity. All right, that could do. Nice and subtle. Now on top of this search bar, we want users to know exactly what this experience is. So we're going to want possibly a search icon and then some text. So again, back in Nucleo, we can type out something like search. We have a bunch of different icons here, or we can do something like magnify. Let's see, we have so many different icons that we can use. And if you don't have any icons, you can definitely use a plugin like Icons for Design. It's a great plugin with open source icons. There we go. That looks pretty good. And then right beside, I might want to, whoa, that's very large, right? So we definitely don't want that. We want to shrink that text down quite a bit. So I'm going to grab on that handle and drag that down. And for the typeface, let's try something like New Cabal or New Cabal, something like that. And we don't want bold. We're going to go for medium. I usually like to reserve my bold weights for call to actions, like primary call to actions, but this could work. There we go. And I love, making my call to actions for search experiences a little bit more direct and, in this case, it would be search for your next collectible, right? Some people just put search, and that's great, but I really like to kind of mold it to the experience that we're building. So in this case, it's NFTs. You're looking for collectibles. Might as well throw that in there. Search for your next collectible. I think that could work. All right. Now, definitely, stepping back, which I try to do from time to time, things are looking kind of small, right? So what we might want to do is either bump up the size of all these elements or shrink down the artboard to one of the smaller presets. But let's go ahead and bump this up a little bit. I'm going to grab these elements here, pop them into a group. Search, I can also turn this into a component if I wanted to. That could do. And then, over to the right, we're going to start adding a few links. So there might be something like a marketplace and an area to browse for artists and trending and that sort of thing. So I'm going to grab my text tool one more time. Marketplace. There we go. And we're using over here, 19 is not a very good number. Let's go for 18 for this search. And as I'm doing that, I might want to press the plus button beside character styles, just so I'm adding that to my document asset so I can easily make changes to that later on. Is there any constraints for heights, or we can have our own height of the search bar, which looks pleasing? I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, so definitely clarify that and let me know. I'm gonna bump this up a little bit. Let's go for 18 as well. Marketplace. Now, to create some additional links, of course, what we can do is hold down our Alt or Option key and drag on over, and then drag another one over. We can also utilize stacks in this situation. So what I'm going to do is I have this link selected. I'm going to pop it into a group, Command and Control G. I'll call this links. And then over within the Properties Inspector, I'm going to turn a stack on. And it's going to default to a horizontal stack. Now I can dive in here and duplicate. So I have 2 additional links. Now I can type out artists, and the other links beautifully shift as I'm doing that. And then what I can also do is adjust the spacing. So I can just bump this up, let's say 50, 60, 70, somewhere in this area here, 72. That's not too bad. And we may want one of these menu items to have a submenu. So you hover over it and another menu appears. So in this case, I'm going to dive in here and we're going to create a very simple caret going downward. So I'm going to grab my pen tool, shortcut key P, and just like that. Change this to white. Maybe I'll thicken this up a little bit. All right. That could do. Hide my grid, and there we go. So we now have our links in place, looking pretty good. And then finally, over to the far right, we may also want a very simple button. This could be used to sign in or connect your wallet, or so many different things you can do with a button like this. And what I'm going to do is just grab my rectangle one more time. I'm going to drag one out, and you're noticing as I'm doing that, the smart guides are helping me out throughout this process, letting me know that it's nicely aligned with the search bar on the left. And if I really wanted to, I can actually grab this search bar, copy it to my clipboard, and just paste the appearance. So I have the same rounded corners, I have the same border, all that fun stuff. Now, one thing you have to think about, right, is do you want that styling to look the same? Because this one over here is something you would click into and you would type something. But this one is supposed to be a button. So you have to think about these things as you're designing. Do you want that to be the same? In some cases you may, some cases you may not. Connect wallet. And like I mentioned earlier, for primary call to actions, I like to bump up the weight a little bit. We'll try bold in this situation. And then to help us out in terms of resizing this button and a lot of different things, what we can do is select all these elements here. I'm going to group them, button, and I'm going to turn on padding. And this will allow me to set the padding around the text. And we're going to talk more about padding in a little bit, but I'm going to make sure that the padding on the left and the right is the same. So right now on the right, which is that last value is 14, I'm going to bump that up to 16. And then the one on the left, or I guess the right, and then the other one was the left, 16 as well. Perfect. Okay. Might want to, and you're going to notice if I do make this a little bit smaller, the padding is going to adjust really nicely. Okie dokie. All right, it's getting there. It is getting there. What we can also do is grab all of these elements here and put them all into a group or a component. And I'll just call this header. And I can also turn a stack on. Now, you may not necessarily want everything to be evenly aligned inside of your stack. So you can definitely adjust the padding individually, right? Or you can hold down your shift key and adjust it all at once. But again, you may want, the search bar to be a little bit closer than the other elements. But this will definitely allow you to grab some of these and shift them around, swap the positions if you need to. Perfect. Whoops. All right, I'm going to drag out some guides from the left-hand side so it snaps on this logo. And the right-hand side as well. We're going to leave some nice padding on either side just so it's not too crammed. All right. Let's see, I'm checking for questions. A lot of people talking about design systems and guides and all that fun stuff. Okay. Now, right below this area here, we may want our large header image. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm just going to grab my line tool, that's what it is, and just drag a line out. Very simple line, just like that. And we want it nice and subtle, just to separate the header and the rest of the content. Give it a little bit more of a breathing room, just like that. And then right below, we can start our header image. Cornell's asking what font is used for the word T. So this one, I converted it into a path, but I believe it was called Casey. And I think I got that from Adobe Fonts. So we want a nice, almost full width header image at the top. So I'm going to grab my rectangle one more time and drag one out just like this. And I'm going to go ahead and round out the corners quite a bit because we do have some rounded corners on our buttons and our search bar. Let's try about 24 pixels. You might want to go back to about 16 pixels, possibly. We'll see what that looks like. But for now, that looks not too bad. And then since we're really focusing on visuals on an experience like this, we may want to bring in a nice colorful image. So if I hop over to Finder, right over here, I do have a bunch of images from Adobe stock. And this one over here is just great for many reasons. One, it's 3D, which is, it's big in the NFT world right now. Two, it's very colorful, so it's eye-catching. And it also has this area in the middle that we can use to add some text. So I'm going to just drag this in and boop. Now, someone is asking, how are you doing the full screen view? What is the shortcut for preview? Oh, so the shortcut, if you don't want to go up here and press that little play button at the top, is Command or Control and then Return. And that'll launch your preview, which is great, especially if you're working very tight. You can just launch it like that, take a quick look, and close it and continue working. All right, so that looks pretty good. And of course, I can double click on this and adjust as needed. just so I have a nice amount of room for our text. Whoops. Perfect. All right. Now, on the inside of this, we may want to really start, letting people know what exactly this service is. They may stumble across it from a link or Google or whatever it might be, and they might not have any idea. So we're going to start with some header text. So let's try something, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with this. It's another discussion you might want to have with your developers and your users. Does it make sense, right? But let's go for something like, it's a little bit too small, bring that up, and we're going to change the color just to something neutral for now. And I might want to change this over to, instead of a fixed width, maybe auto height, and drag that over. Something like sipping tea and collecting teas, right? Again, it may not make sense to your users, but it's a little fun play on the whole NFT. You're collecting teas, which is the tokens in this case, sipping tea, fun pun or play on the actual logo. Does it make sense? Possibly not, right? And then in terms of the typeface, something like Aurea Ultra is really interesting, and they have an italic version we can possibly use. Looks interesting, right? So there's Roman and there's italic. Both of them are kind of nice. I'm not sure which one I like more. What do you all think in the chat? Do you like the Roman version or the italic version? And while I'm waiting for all of you to chime in, let's go ahead and I'm actually going to add these colors to my assets, and let's try. That's not bad. Not bad. I do want to, make sure that I'm using the same colors throughout my design. It's going to make it easier on the developers if they ever have to develop this. And they also, it makes it easier to edit later on. So if I did decide to tweak this pink a little bit, I can just right click, press edit, and just make some very minor changes. And it's also going to push those changes up there. So we have Roman, which is this one right here. All right, we're going to stick with that. Oh, no, someone said 2 for italic, 2 for Roman, 2 for italic, Roman, italic, Roman. It's basically an even split right now. Italic, oh boy. I think it's literally an even split. Chris just broke it with Roman. Okay, we're gonna stick with Roman for now. We can very easily change it later. And then right below, we may want some subheader to really start explaining what this is. So I'm going to grab my text tool, drag one out. And for this one, now this text is way too big, right? So we're going to change this up to something like New Cabal one more time. And let's go for, maybe we'll try bold and really drop this down. We're going to try maybe 22 possibly. We'll see what that looks like. There we go. It almost fit perfectly. All right, we've got more votes for italic and Roman, and we've got a vote for Comic Sans. I guess Comic Sans it is, right? Oh gosh, no, I can't even do that. I joke a lot about Comic Sans, but I don't know if I can do that. All right, I'm going to add these to my character styles, and then right below we may want to include a few call to actions. So just like we did earlier with this button at the top, we're going to drag out another button. Just like that. And for this one, we're going to grab our pink. We're going to round out the corners a little bit. Let's try 8. That could work. And then on the inside, oh no, we still have Comic Sans. What is happening? Change this to white. It's probably a little bit too large, so we're going to drop this down a touch. Make sure this is nice and large. And we do have bold selected, which is great. And for something like this, what we're definitely going to want to do is turn this into a component, right? So I'm going to select both of these elements here. I'm going to press the plus button in my document assets to create a component, and I'll just call this button primary. And even on the component, we can go ahead and turn on the stack if we had multiple objects in there, or we can just turn on padding. And I'm going to make sure to set the, let's go for 16 on both sides. Perfect. That looks pretty good. You know what, let's actually go for a little bit more than 16. Let's try 24. That could work. And another benefit of using components is we can create several states. So if I go ahead and press that plus button over to the right, I can create, of course I can create a hover state. We might get into that later, but I'm going to create a new state. This will be called secondary. And then for this one, we may want to go for our lovely purple color and become a creator. Now I think I'm using, yes, I'm using title case on here, so I'll use it on here as well. And this will allow me to duplicate this over and just switch it on over to secondary. Now, here's something we have to talk about, right? These two buttons, because we have padding enabled, are completely different sizes. We have become a creator is a little bit larger than connect wallet because the text layer is larger. In some cases, this would work, but in this case, it's kind of adding a little bit more weight. It's kind of pushing people in the direction of this become a creator button, which we may not necessarily want, right? So what we're going to do instead is we're not going to have padding enabled at all, right? So we want these buttons to remain exactly the same size. So now if I duplicate this over and switch it on over to our secondary button, these buttons are now the same size. So they have a bit more weight. Now, another thing you have to think about is if you are truly creating two buttons, one primary and one secondary, do you want both of them to be solid buttons, right? We have our solid pink button over here, and we have a solid purple button. If we were designing a true secondary button, it would probably be best to either go for a more neutral color, like a gray with, you know, a darker text, or maybe, you know, a colorful border, something like this, and then the text would match that color there. But in this particular case, I almost look at both of these as primary buttons. They're just directed at different people, right? This one might be directed at people who are collecting, and this one, people who are creating. So I think in this case, both of them being solid could work. Perfect. I'm going to group both of these. Call this buttons. Oh, my hands are all over the place today. And I'm also going to turn a stack on, and this will allow me to very easily just swap the position of these. If, you know, I'm working with my user experience team and they think, you know, or they suggest maybe we want to push people to become a creator more than connect their wallet. So we can very easily make that change there. All right. Starting to come together. We've got our buttons, we have our text, we have our header, and then, you know, maybe we want to highlight who created this image in the background, because it could come from a user who uses this particular service. So maybe down at the bottom left-hand corner, we might want to create a little bit of a badge. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, drag out a badge. I'm going to round out the corners completely down here. There we go. And then in terms of the styling, we're going to make a few changes. So what we might want to do, because there's some nice colors back there that we might want to bring a little bit of that color in, we might want to turn a background blur on, but not this background blur, because we're going to have text on. I hope I have a nice drink. Yeah, I should, you know, I should probably drink water. My throat is getting, hold on. I have a massive water bottle, but my throat's getting very dry. Thank you for reminding me to drink water. All right. Now, we definitely don't want this background blur to be this blurry, because we're going to have text on top of this. And it's probably going to be, you know, purple or pink or something like that. And if you have all these different colors kind of blending in, it's going to be difficult for that text to really remain readable. So in this case, I like to keep my background blurs very subtle, bump up the effect opacity. So we still have a little bit of that color coming in, right? That's quite the bottle. It's like bigger than my head. Look at this. It's a very large bottle, but it keeps me drinking water all day because I'm too lazy to actually walk to the kitchen and refill glasses. So I just bought a massive bottle. I fill it once or twice during the day and I'm good to go, right? All right. Now also on top, we may want to put a picture of the user. So I don't believe it's water. I hope it's water, but it is water. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to actually duplicate this layer. I'm going to change the color so you can all see it. I'm going to bring this in so we have a nice circle. And I'll just bring it down a little bit so we have some padding. And then if I hop over to my Toy Faces library, I'm going to grab an image. We'll keep it nice and simple, this purple image right here. And then over to the right, we might want to bring in this text. And this will allow us to add the username. Now, what we can do is we can start putting all this information into a group or a component. So I'm going to select all of these layers here. Let's pop it into a component. User tag, and I'm going to make sure to turn on padding. And now if I dive in here and type out something, the username, for example. Oh, it's set to center. We don't want that. At Comic Sanders. It's a great username. Perfect. So now we have this little tag here, and we can also add a bit of a drop shadow to help separate from the background because some of the images may be a little bit lighter than some others. So I'm going to add a bit of a drop shadow, bump it down a touch, keep it nice and subtle. There we go. All right. Shouldn't the subheader width be a little bit less than the header? Possibly. Yeah, you could be right. So if I bring this inwards, what I'll want to do in this case is just bring the text down a touch so we just have 2 lines. You could do that. And one thing you have to think about is if you're creating a responsive design, it's very difficult to make sure that that's always going to be the case. So in general, I completely agree. But in this case, we'll leave it like that, and then we'll let the developers deal with that. All right. So we have Comic Sanders. We have our lovely user. Let me actually switch this toy face up to the pink one, just so we have a bit of variation. There we go. It might be a little bit too large, but we can always shrink that down. Shrink this down a bit. All right, that could do. Let's go for 24 and 24. I'm just holding down my Alt Option key and I'm hovering over the edges of this shape in the background, and it's letting me know how far this particular tag is from those edges. And I have 24 pixels and it looks pretty good. Okay, take another peek. And what I might want to do is just separate these buttons a little bit more. Let's try 16. All right. Perfect. Love it so far. Thank you. I appreciate that, gal. Now, what we're going to do is down below, in addition to this big banner, we may want a section to highlight maybe some pieces that are currently being sold or maybe are going on auction soon, right? So down here, I'm actually going to go ahead and double click on the artboard and just drag this down. Now you're going to notice that when I did that, we have this blue handle over to the left, and this is your viewport handle. So anything above this is going to be visible immediately when you launch the preview, and anything below is going to be visible when you scroll. So if I launch one more time, we see all that information above the handle, and we can scroll down to see more. Of course, we have nothing down there, so let's go ahead and create some stuff. Now, what I might want to do is create maybe 3 or 4 of these areas. Something, like this. And each one's going to have maybe a preview of what that particular NFT or design is. Going to have some information about the user, the title, and maybe a button to place a bid. Now, I want to make sure that I can have, maybe we'll go for 3 of them going across. So they're nice and large. So what I like to do is, create one shape all the way across so it snaps. And then inside of the properties inspector over here to the right, you can actually enter some math. So I can divide by 3 and then maybe minus 16 possibly. So there's some nice padding, right? And this will just ensure that we have 3 of them that fit really nicely. But we're going to start with 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to create this a little bit more of a darker feel, very similar to the search bar and the button at the top right-hand corner. So let's go for a nice dark blue, somewhere in this area here. And very similar to what I did earlier is I'm going to set the border to white and then just pull that down a little bit. Let's try about 5%. I'm going to round out the corners a little bit. Let's try 16. See what that looks like. That might be a bit much. Let's try 8. And if we do turn one of these into a component, it's going to be very easy to update that and change those rounded corners a little bit later on. All right, a lot of people are talking about colors and making sure it's readable, accessibility, and all that fun stuff. Yes, very important. All right, so over top of this, the first thing we might want is to showcase that image. So I'm going to duplicate this shape. I'm going to pull this up a little bit. And if I hop over to Finder, let's grab another image. Maybe this one over here, pop that in. That just looks fancy, doesn't it? Maybe I'll unround these corners at the bottom. I'm holding down Alt-Option and drag that in. That looks pretty good. And then right below, we might want to start adding in some of that information. So I'm going to go ahead and just do some placeholder text here. And for the title, because the title is going to be fairly large, we can possibly get away with something a little bit fancier, right? So if we did want to go for, that typeface that we were using earlier, the Aurea Ultra, we can do something like that here. And we might want to try the italic weight. Let's set that to white so it's readable. There we go. And then below this, we might want to display, what the current price is of this particular piece. So in this case, let's duplicate this downwards. And we might want to go for something like 1.2 Ethereum, right? Now, because this is going to be a smaller text layer, and because, especially on the numbers, a little bit difficult to read with that Aurea Ultra typeface, let's go back to our new Cabell. And we can do something like bold, possibly. And then maybe over to the left, we might want to put a little bit of an icon. And this could consist of maybe 3 lines. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. And let's go ahead and pull in some colors, right? So in our document assets, I can go ahead, maybe this one here, I'm going to apply as border, and this one we don't really have a color for. So let's actually apply any of these as a border so we get a nice base, and then maybe we'll change it to a blue, something like that. There we go. I'm going to group these. I'm going to call this price. Perfect. And then over to the far right, we may want to indicate how long is left in this particular auction. 6 hours left. And possibly just to give a little bit of a visual, we may also want to add in a bit of an icon. So if I hop back over to Nucleo, let's go for Font Awesome again. Let's try clock. Oh gosh, which one do I use? There's so many of them. I don't know. Let's just try this one. Big decisions, people. Big decisions. Cornell saying Adobe Max is getting closer and closer. I wonder if it's going to be online and free like last year. It is. So we did announce that it will be online and it will be completely free. And I will be there. Obviously, I'm going to be hosting at least one session. And the one I will be hosting, I think I can tell you this, is what's new in Adobe XD. Because we will obviously have some pretty snazzy new stuff this year. All right. Drop this down to medium, possibly. Whoops. I'm going to group these two elements. And I can position this all the way over to the right. Now, taking a quick look at this, some of that information is looking a little bit small. So, we're definitely going to need to bump some of this up a little bit. So I'm going to bump this up about 2. Bump this up as well. Let's do 20. And the same for this one as well. And that's definitely the importance of just stepping back and taking a look at how things are looking when you're previewing. All right, that's looking a little bit better. I might want to gonna add a little bit more padding on the left and the right. Now, of course, what you can also do is put all of this into a larger group or component and add some padding that way, which we'll do in just a moment. Have you sold any NFTs? I have sold a few, but I have not released any lately. So I might get back into that at some point. Maybe I won't, I don't know, we'll see. And then across here, the primary call to action is to place a bid. So I'm going to drag out a button across the whole thing. Now, of course, we do have buttons saved as a component already, but this is going to be a very different button. So we're going to create a different one. This will be about 8 pixels. Video will be available offline. So I think you're talking about, will you be able to watch the Adobe Max videos offline? I mean, you'll probably have to be online to download the videos, but I'm not sure exactly if you can watch them offline, if you can save them offline. I'm not quite sure yet, but it'll definitely be an online event that you'll be able to watch. And then afterwards, you'll be able to watch them even after the event is over. All right. So at this point, what we can do is select all this information here. I'm going to pop it into a group, call it NFTea, and now I can turn padding on. So I do have 16 pixels at the bottom. That could work. And then this right here, we're going to make sure this blends in a little bit. Something like that. Nice subtle border. And then, whoops, place a bid. Perfect. All right, who else thinks Sir Howard is into dark mode? I love dark mode. I really do love dark mode. One day, maybe Adobe XD will have dark mode once we tackle some bigger priority features. But yeah, I like dark mode. There we go. It's making very minor tweaks to this particular button. All right, that could do. It's not bad, it's not great, but I think it could work. All right. Now, one more thing we might want to add, very similar to our badge at the top, is some information about the user. So we can do the exact same thing up here. So I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I can also, grab the component, drag that in, and just make it a bit smaller. Now, because padding is enabled here, what we'll have to do is make these elements a bit smaller. This might still be a little bit too big. Yeah, possibly a little bit too big. I'm going to also reduce the padding a little bit. Perfect. Okay. What if we use yellow for the place a bid button? We can try that. I think that might stand out a little bit too much. Well, I guess the actual button itself could be a different color, right? And these are definitely things you have to play around with and think about. The only reason that I kind of kept it fairly neutral is because, we're going to have at least 3 going across, and then we're going to have a few going down possibly. So that yellow button over and over and over again, it might be a little bit too jarring on our eyes. So I kept this one a little bit neutral. All right, perfect. And then finally, over on the right-hand side, we may want a very quick element here, and this could be something like a heart or a like button or something like that. And if I grab my polygon tool and type in less than 3 inside of the properties inspector, we now have a heart, which is wonderful, right? Look at that. Nice simple way of creating a heart. Although that one looks like it's filled in, which we don't want right away. So we'll do something like either this, or we can do a border, that sort of thing. But that's looking pretty good. So now that we have one of these complete, what I'm going to want to do is turn this into a component. So Command or Control K one more time. And now I can create additional ones going across this section here. We can do that with a repeat grid, or we can do that with a stack. I'm going to pop this into a group, call this NFTeas. I'm going to turn a stack on, and then duplicate and duplicate. And I can adjust the spacing just like that so they line up really nicely. And even though these are components, we have our main component over here, I can still hop in and swap this out. So I can drop this in here. Look at that. Look at that neon cat. Isn't that amazing? And then let's drop another one. Maybe this one here. Oops, I've got to deselect that. What am I doing? There we go. Perfect. And I'll make a few additional overrides. Let's grab a yellow toy face, and we'll grab a red toy face, and there we go. Maybe this one is, maybe it's 4 Ethereum. And this one might be 2.2. All right, what if a third-party plugin offers dark mode for XD? So I don't think the API allows that at the moment, but maybe one day that the API may expand to allow things like that. But I mean, that just opens up a whole other can of worms, right? People are going to be creating orange modes and green modes and purple modes. It would just not be very pleasant. And I'm going to wrap this up just by adding some text, just to let users know what this area is, new to the marketplace. Bold looks pretty good. If we want to get really fancy, we can go for extra bold. And there we go. We now have our section. So if we go ahead and preview one more time, we've created this header at the top with our logo, search, and some links over here to the right. This big header section with some call to actions. Scroll down, and we have our gallery with our components and our stacks as well. And of course, this amazing cat. Am I allergic to cats? I am. I'm actually deathly allergic to cats, which is no fun. So that's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining me. Next week, we're going to continue this. We're going to build out the individual pages and with all sorts of different components and repeat grids and all that fun stuff. Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few moments. Stick around for that, and I will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.